even in the UK, there's been a couple of journalists arrested because how they've been talking out against Israel. I think it's Richard Medhurst is one of them.
Yes, well, the other one is a comrade of mine, Sarah Wilkinson, and I just saw Sarah a few weeks ago in Istanbul when we were part of a flotilla campaign to break the siege of Gaza. And, you know, she's a journalist and very vocal about her Palestinian views. But I haven't seen all of her tweets, but I've not seen anything which would raise my eyebrows or think, oh, she's going too far. However, just last week, she had her home raided. It was a dawn raid with masked men, police officers, and they trashed her home. And I'm not quite sure what they were searching for, but they removed her, all her communication devices, her telephones and laptops. They even went into the attic and kicked over a vase that was holding her late mother's ashes, which were scattered at a family ceremony. And the mother's ashes were just strewn right across the floor. Well, you can imagine how distressing that must have been. But what I found particularly sinister was that the police from the West Mercia force took her for questioning, and one of the questions that they asked her was about a water well her NGO had built in Gaza.
Oh my God.
And it is
that is awful.
Would an ordinary British bobby be interested in a water well in Gaza? You know, they're not asking questions on behalf of West Mercia Constabulary. They're asking questions for Israel. And I'm sure that more will come out, and we will find out just who has been supplying the questions to British police. And she's been charged under anti-terrorism laws. More often than not, they're used more to frighten and restrict people. So it's highly unlikely she'll go through a court case. But they will, the rules and conditions around terrorism cases will restrict her from operating as a journalist. So, you know, it's really quite frightening. I mean, thankfully, I live in Scotland, but this is happening in England, and I'm looking over the border and thinking, you know, it must be like waking up in Riyadh.
Yeah, seriously. Also, we had the Tories for, what was it, 12 years, 14 years, and they were just getting nastier and nastier. But then Labour Party came in, and you'd think that there'd be some change. There's absolutely no change in policy. And then the human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer, comes and says, like, Israel blocking water and electricity of the whole population of Gaza. He saw no problem with that. So it's just...
No, well,
there's no...
It shows what an authoritarian ruler he is. And his nickname at the moment, which is sticking, is two-tier Keir. And the man really does have double standards. You know, you say that he was a human rights lawyer, that was his background, and yet he was quite happy to supply weapons to Israel, despite various civil servants threatening to resign because they knew that what the Israelis were doing with British weapons was illegal under international law. Therefore, if they continue to supply the weapons, everybody involved in that chain is complicit. And some were genuinely concerned that they would end up in the international criminal courts. So, you know, on war crimes charges. And as we know from Nuremberg, obeying orders is no longer acceptable. It doesn't wash.
Yeah. So you said that you were in Turkey recently. Was there, because I heard there was going to be like a flotilla to bring aid to Gaza. Has that happened, or is that underway? Or
no, the plans were scuppered by the Zionist state, but there was quite an astonishing flurry of activity in Turkey during the build-up to the flotilla sailing, and we had foreign ministers and government representatives from across Europe and America flying in and out, having emergency meetings with the Turkish government. And we found out later they were telling the Turkish government, you cannot let this flotilla sail. The Americans in particular were really keen that we did not weigh anchor. And that is because at the time, the Americans were building what they were calling a humanitarian aid platform in the bay of, or the port of Gaza. And of course, we now know that that platform wasn't used for humanitarian aid at all. It had a military purpose and was used as a platform to launch a military attack in Gaza. And of course, had we sailed into the port of Gaza with our aid ship, we would have seen that the Americans were not delivering aid at all. They were delivering weapons. And so this is why there was such a flurry to try and stop us from sailing at all costs. And it was,
and also because
it was incredible.
Yeah, and because they remember also what happened last time there was a flotilla from Turkey, and you were on that, and how much of a ripple effect that had. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Was that in 2008 or 10?
It was 2010. I think you're referring to the Mavi Marmara, in which 9 Turkish human rights activists were killed by Israelis who boarded the ship. And it was, I wasn't on the ship. I was due to be on and be picked up in Lebanon, but probably, thankfully, as it turned out, that didn't happen. So I wasn't on board the ship, but I had friends who were, and the storming of the ship by heavily armed so-called elite squad soldiers was astonishing. And they, you know, they just let rip with their machine guns on unarmed civilians, and criticised the civilians when they picked up iron bars to try and protect themselves,
defend themselves.
So that was 2010. In 2008, I was on one of 2 boats that sailed in to the port in Gaza. And when we arrived, more than 100,000 people in Gaza came into the port. A lot of them had jumped into the water. They were so excited to see us.
Yeah.
And that's when I discovered that it was because we were the first boat to sail into Gaza port in 41 years. So
Wow.
people think that the siege is just something that's happened in the last decade. It hasn't. It's been going on for 5 decades. And, you know, the Mediterranean Sea is part of Gaza. And so just a few hundred miles away, you've got people partying in Cyprus, in Ibiza, in lots of Western resorts. And yet you've got this ongoing war in Gaza. And it's really quite astonishing.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.